What's up? Welcome. Just thought I'd use the old intro just to mix things up a little bit. I'm going to start with headlines and then go into more specific stories. We'll have Gaza teen explains what it's like to starve. God damn, dude. We'll have Democracy Now! Start us off, as usual.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's military says it now controls 40% of Gaza City as its forces expand their assault on densely populated residential areas, including camps for displaced Palestinians.
How do we know if that's true? We don't know. They always lie. The fuck do they expect us to think? Like, there's no control over Gaza City.
Attacks so far today have killed at least 44 people across the Gaza Strip, including at least 7 children. This is Samaya Mikdad, a relative of a family hit by an Israeli strike near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City Thursday that killed a pregnant woman and her unborn child.
The woman was getting ready to deliver a baby. Here are the diapers for the baby, baby's clothes. In the month she was due to deliver. What is her fault? This is a people's tent. What is their fault? Is it a war against Hamas or is it a war against the people?
Palestinian health officials say at least 30% of those killed by Israeli attacks are minors, amounting to 28 children or an entire classroom slaughtered every day for nearly 2 years. Meanwhile, a prominent Palestinian academic has starved to death amidst Israel's blockade of food and medicine. Before his death, 60-year-old Omar Harb lost 26 members of his family to Israeli attacks, including his wife, several children, and grandchildren. He died Thursday.
How do you like take a morsel of food when you know that someone else might be starving? I mean, the choice that you probably make every time you take a bite to eat, like, can I give this to someone else who could benefit? Do I want to live my life eating and watching other people starve, or do I want to give up what little I have and starve myself? And every iteration of that.
Reportedly weighing less than 40 kilograms or 88 pounds.
This is the same guy?
With Harb's
I'm speechless.
Several.
I don't even see it. Like, it's a completely different person. God damn.
less than 40 kilograms, or 88 pounds. With Harb's death, the number of Palestinians who've died of hunger and malnutrition has soared to at least 370. Meanwhile, Hamas has released a video showing Israeli hostages Guy Gilboa Dalal and Alon Ohel being driven around Gaza City, purportedly on August 28th. The video's release comes after Israeli leaders rejected a Hamas proposal for a comprehensive deal to release remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and an end to Israel's assault. The U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions Thursday against three...
What the fuck was that? Dude. Where are the hostages? Oh, they must be underground, under tunnel. No, they're just driving around Gaza City in a Honda or whatever. Jesus.
Prominent Palestinian human rights groups operating in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, citing their support for an international criminal court investigation into Israeli war crimes committed in Gaza, including genocide. In a statement, the Center for Constitutional Rights condemned the U.S. government's sanctions against Al-Haq, Amazan, and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. CCR writes, quote, at the height of Israel's U.S.-backed genocide against the Palestinian people, the Trump administration cynically chosen to punish the advocates leading the charge for accountability. This attack cements the United States government's complicity in Israel's crimes, CCR writes. In Afghanistan, the death toll from a series of earthquakes has climbed to 2,200 as a third earthquake struck the southeastern part of Afghanistan Thursday. The earthquakes left tens of thousands of people homeless and injured more than 3,600. Many women were left trapped under the rubble due to cultural rules enforced by the Taliban forbidding physical contact between men and women who are not family members. A rescue worker speaking to the New York Times said, quote, it felt like women were invisible, unquote. In Indonesia, authorities fired a police officer in connection with the death of a food delivery driver killed in Jakarta during an anti-government protest. The protests, led by students, workers, and human rights groups, have been spreading across Indonesia since last week, drawing attention to lavish spending by politicians as well as police violence.
I saw that video, and it's been spread all over online, and that Jeep just kind of like pushed him along the ground with its bumper, and then it stopped and then slowly drove over him, dude. Brutal.
On Wednesday, hundreds of Indonesian women wielding brooms joined protesters who marched on the parliament in Jakarta.
Women are at the heart of the struggle, but our voices are often not heard. One thing that should be considered is the participation of women, how the state has an obligation to value, respect, fulfill, and promote human rights and women's rights, but the state neglects to do so.
We'll go to Jakarta later in the broadcast to speak with Human Rights Watch about the protests. On Capitol Hill, senators grilled Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thursday over his false claims about vaccines and mass firings and resignations of public health officials at the CDC and other agencies. The hearing opened with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden accusing Kennedy of elevating crackpots and conspiracy theorists while seeking to cut off access to vaccines. Virginia Senator Mark Warner asked Kennedy whether he accepts that 1 million Americans died from COVID, to which Kennedy replied, I don't know how many.
I saw the discourse breaking down this whole back and forth, and it's just insufferable. Like, RFK's doing exactly what we all thought he was going to do: delegitimize the efficacy of vaccines, or just make them harder to get in general. And then Elizabeth Warren's doing what we all expect, just, you know, symbolic pushback. Nothing really of substance here.
Died, and I don't think anybody knows.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services doesn't know how many Americans died from COVID. Doesn't know if the vaccine helped prevent any deaths. And you are sitting as Secretary of Health and Human Services? How can you be that ignorant?
We'll have more on that hearing after headlines. On Thursday, 2 former top officials at the National Institutes of Health filed whistleblower complaints, saying they were forced out of their leadership positions after they criticized the Trump administration for canceling grants and spreading vaccine skepticism. Separately, ousted CDC Director Susan Monares wrote in an op-ed that Kennedy had her fired after she insisted all recommendations be based on credible data, not ideology or preordained outcomes. We'll be speaking later in the broadcast with Dr. Paul Offit, a vaccine expert at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, who was removed from the Food and Drug Administration's Vaccine Advisory Committee without explanation. President Trump's nominee to serve on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors said Thursday he has no plans to step down as a senior economic advisor to the president and would instead take an unpaid leave of absence from his White House role while working at the Fed. Stephen Miron's proposal drew sharp criticism from Senate Democrats who said his confirmation would threaten the U.S. central bank's independence. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren spoke at the start of his confirmation hearing.
Illegally removing a Fed governor is a key step in Trump's scheme to destroy the independence of the Fed and turn it into his own personal toy. He wants to install his lackeys so that we will have a Fed that uses its power to please the president, but that can't be trusted to keep inflation under control.
None of the Republicans in the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee appeared to oppose Miron's nomination, indicating he's likely to be confirmed. Meanwhile, the Justice Department's launched a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, who's accused of criminal mortgage fraud for listing more than one property as a primary residence when she applied for loans, allegedly to secure lower interest rates. Cook's lawyer said in response the Trump administration is inventing justifications to fire Cook as part of President Trump's pressure campaign against the Fed, an independent government agency. ProPublica reports at least 3 of President Trump's cabinet members call multiple homes their primary residences on mortgages. In Minneapolis, Vice President J.D. Vance met Wednesday with families and survivors of last week's mass shooting at the Annunciation Catholic Church. Protesters gathered along the route of Vance's motorcade, holding signs reading pro-life equals pro-gun safety and hate won't make America great. On Thursday, CNN reported senior Justice Department officials are weighing proposals to limit transgender people's right to possess firearms because the Minneapolis shooter was a trans woman. According to the Violence Prevention Project, 98% of mass shooters in the United States are men and boys. Less than 1% are trans people. Republican leaders of both the House and Senate will reportedly not hold votes to extend President Trump's takeover of the Washington, D.C. police force before it expires next week. This comes after D.C.'s Attorney General filed a federal lawsuit seeking to have the deployment declared unlawful and disbanded, and after a federal magistrate judge condemned what he called implausible, illegal, and immoral, unquote, prosecutions of defendants accused of felonies after they were swept up for relatively minor offenses. Meanwhile, the Justice Department Thursday sued Boston over its sanctuary policy limiting cooperation between city, police, and federal immigration agents. And in Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker says he expects the Trump administration to deploy a surge of ICE agents to Chicago this weekend, and that Trump could use resulting protests to deploy National Guard troops despite the governor's objections. Northwestern University's president, Michael Schill, has announced he will resign. This comes after the Trump administration froze $790 million in research funding to Northwestern back in April. Schill had testified on Capitol Hill last year about alleged anti-Semitism on campus and was grilled by Republican lawmakers about negotiating with pro-Palestinian student organizers to end protests on campus. Schill's resignation came a day after Harvard won a landmark lawsuit challenging the Trump administration for similarly withholding research funds. In Harvard's case, it was more than $2 billion. A federal appeals court ruled Thursday that the immigration detention center in Florida Everglades Swamp, dubbed Alligator Alcatraz by the Republicans, can continue operating. The ruling blocks the lower court's ruling that ordered state and federal agencies to shut down the Immigration and Customs Enforcement jail. Meanwhile, the Trump administration says it's using the notorious Angola State Prison in Louisiana to incarcerate undocumented immigrants held by ICE. Republican Governor Jeff Landry was joined outside the prison Wednesday by Attorney General Pam Bondi and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem as they announced plans to house more than 400 men inside, half of whom are due to arrive by the end of the month. President Trump signing an executive order today renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War, the title it held for over 150 years until just after the Second World War, when the name was changed through an act of Congress. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who's consistently referred to U.S. soldiers as warriors, will now have the title of Secretary of War. The Pentagon says 2 Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets flew near a U.S. naval warship in international waters near Venezuela Thursday, describing the incident as a show of force. The reported incident came as senior Trump administration officials are refusing to provide proof of their claims that a U.S. military strike that blew up a boat in the Caribbean earlier this week was carrying drugs from Venezuela. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Wednesday he watched a live video feed of an operation that the vessel targeted by the Pentagon was operated by the Tren de Aragua gang. But Hegseth provided no evidence to back the claims. Venezuela's communication minister claimed the video was a fake made with artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, President Nicolas Maduro announced he's mobilizing over 8 million people into the National Bolivarian militia to defend Venezuela against U.S. aggression. We'll have more on this story later in the broadcast. And here in New York City, Mayor Eric Adams reportedly considering dropping out of the mayoral race after he met with one of President Trump's closest advisors, Steve Witkoff, this week in Florida. Speaking to reporters, President Trump confirmed he's paying close attention to the mayoral race, saying, quote, "I would like to see 2 people drop out and have it be one-on-one," unquote. The New York Times reports Trump is considering offering Adams and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa positions in his administration to clear the field for former Governor Andrew Cuomo to challenge Zohran Mamdani in the general election after Mamdani defeated Cuomo in the Democratic primary in June. Mamdani spoke out Wednesday about Trump's interference in New York City politics.
We are talking about a mayor who was facing an indictment that was then dropped by this administration to ensure greater collaboration with the immigrant.
We get it. Andrew Cuomo fucking sucks. You're gonna win. God, dude. Who gives a shit?
Mamdani. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching.
So annoying. How much of a car salesman he comes across as. The basic ass principles he's standing for. Toothless. Smiling and toothless.
Let's bring in Elijah Manier, a military and political analyst. He joins us from Paris. Elijah, good to see you again. What is your sense of where we're at right now? Is this the start of a new phase of the Israeli military campaign in Gaza City?
I'm trying to figure out if my video playback is...
Thank you for having me. Well, beyond the military tactics, one wonder why now and why with such a scale? Is it the beginning of the invasion of Gaza City or a negotiation under fire? Flattening Gaza high rises isn't just about denying Hamas position. It feeds directly into Netanyahu's broader strategy. He doesn't want to avoid the war. He doesn't want quick victory. He wants his terms to be met, because if the war ends suddenly, he would be facing election and accountability. Therefore, not bringing the hostages alive, not willing to negotiate, not willing to give an answer to the positive reply of Hamas, then he goes to his best option is to go to war. And he's trying to say this is the beginning and the gate of hell will be open, as the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said.
And the Israeli army, before carrying out this raid, said that it took several measures to reduce the risk of harm to civilians. And they used precision munitions, apparently, as well as aerial surveillance, as well as additional intelligence information. This is a statement from the Israeli army. How genuine is a statement like this, given people were given 15 minutes to evacuate before the strikes took place?
Any military analyst would look at the pictures and the video that you are putting on screen. It's impossible for in 15 minutes to evacuate hundreds of tents and all the people, refugee living in one building, and then to go where? Is there any safe place? Are the missiles launched by the Israelis that accurate? We haven't seen that claim really manifesting itself precisely in the last 700 days of war. We've seen how the Israelis are killing civilians and sometimes apologizing, most of the time accusing them of being a Hamas. So no, it is not giving them enough time to evacuate and should not bomb in the vicinity of another refugee camp of people who evacuated more than 8 to 10 times from different parts of the strip.
All right, let's move on.
Imagine the government being able to...
Is this even gonna be watchable? Like, I'm looking at the VODs that I've posted, trying to figure out why they have no views, and it's because they're unwatchable. The fucking... It just stutters the entire time. Buffering, pausing. It's like, why even do lives at that point?
to break into your phone without you doing anything at all. You don't have to click a link or open a file. Just getting a text message can be enough. Once the spyware has infected your phone, they have access to everything: your messages, email, photos, real-time location, and even messages on encrypted apps. This new spyware uses what are called zero-click exploits, and it's a sprawling multi-million-dollar industry. Now, the US government is buying this exact type of tech. Welcome back to Free Speech Friday, my series covering the fight for free expression and civil liberties online. Just this week, it was announced that US Immigrations and Customs Enforcement officials, aka ICE agents, will soon have access to one of the world's most sophisticated hacking tools, thanks to the Trump administration lifting a hold on a government review of a contract with Paragon Solutions, a company founded in Israel that makes spyware that can hack into any mobile phone, including any application, even encrypted apps. This new agreement between Paragon and ICE gives ICE access to the Israeli spyware's platform Graphite. Unlike old school wiretap programs, Graphite doesn't need to break the math behind encryption. Instead, Graphite infects a phone directly, and once it's inside, it can see your messages before they're scrambled into encryption, or right after they've been unscrambled to display on your screen. This means photos, texts, calls, literally everything, including the microphone on your phone, can be exposed. Paragon software turns every single personal cell phone into a surveillance gadget working against the person that owns it. Now, this ICE Paragon deal has had a very strange journey. The contract was initially signed in late 2024, but then it was quickly put on hold by the White House because the Biden administration had sort of made a show of limiting federal use of commercial spyware. In fact, in March 2023, President Biden signed an executive order called 14093 designed to restrict agencies from buying tools that pose national security risks or have been used to target dissidents, journalists, and U.S. personnel abroad. The contract with Paragon looked like an early test of whether they would basically be enforcing these rules or whether this was just another meaningless declaration for the government. So for almost a year, it's been sitting basically under review. Now, just this week, it's been announced that the pause was lifted quietly and the deal went live. ICE's cyber unit, Homeland Security Investigations, suddenly had access pretty much overnight to one of the most powerful spyware systems on the entire planet. Now, Paragon is often compared to the NSO Group, the Israeli company behind Pegasus, which is the world's most famous spyware. Pegasus became really famous initially back in 2016, but then again in 2021 with the Pegasus papers, when watchdog groups found the spyware on the phones of journalists, activists, and even heads of state. Like Pegasus, Paragon Group's graphite doesn't crack encryption on the wire. It compromises the phone itself, giving the person operating the spyware information to messages, calls, etc., everything on your phone, basically. So let's talk a little bit more about Paragon, because I think this is a company that not everybody has heard of, and it hasn't really been in the news as much. Like a lot of these spyware firms, Paragon has ties to Israel's defense industry. And just like NSO, its graphite spyware has already been detected in the wild, according to researchers at Citizen Lab, which is a very well-respected watchdog group. The University of Toronto actually published evidence just earlier this year linking Paragon spyware to real-world infections of the phones on journalists in Europe. Apple even sent threat notifications to some Paragon victims in April 2025, alerting them that they had been targeted with state-sponsored spyware. Paragon suspended a contract with Italy after reports surfaced that the tool had been used to spy on reporters. So I just want you guys to realize that these aren't hypotheticals. Like, this shows exactly how quickly spyware, no matter how carefully it's marketed, can and will be used against people who have nothing to do with terrorism or national security. So this is now what ICE has access to. So when people say ICE can read your texts, what they're saying is that if ICE wants, it can now target anybody with graphite. And if they manage to infect that person's phone, which they don't really need approval for, right? They could just go ahead and do it. Suddenly they can literally read everything from your messages on Signal, WhatsApp, iMessage. It's basically like they're looking over your shoulder and they're able to see everything that you're doing on that device. Now, I don't want that to just make you give up and say, oh, what's the point of using all these encrypted apps? The government can just see and do anything anyway. Like, why do I have to use encryption? Encryption still does matter. It stops bulk interception, and it keeps companies like Meta or your phone carrier from casually peeking into your conversations. So you do want to keep using encrypted apps. But once your device is compromised by Paragon's graphite, encryption won't help, unfortunately. Now, I do want to talk about some of the limitations of this new spyware. Tools like graphite are not designed for mass surveillance. So each infection has to be deployed against a specific target, often with a very tailored attack. That's why these government agencies tend to use them kind of sparingly in cases that they consider high priority. Of course, sparingly is a completely relative word. ICE is a very big agency with a very wide mandate that goes well beyond immigration enforcement. Homeland Security Investigations, the unit that's getting access to graphite, also works on things like smuggling, drug cases, money laundering, cybercrime, and it has a terrible record of stretching its surveillance powers in ways that go way beyond its original mission. For example, it's used customs summonses, basically these tools meant to narrow trade investigations, to demand high amounts of information from telecom companies, schools, and even just get people's health information. So giving agencies like this...
Yeah, definitely go check that out, because it's a great work by Taylor Lorenz. LSD showing early promise as a potential anxiety treatment. It's worth checking out. All my Steam's gone. I'm burnt the fuck out. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of working hard every single day just to have my stream be just unwatchable. I mean, the audio's fine, but I make a unique thumbnail. My entire previous channel was deleted, so I've got nothing to show for it. Everything's just gonna have to be pre-edited stuff, no more lives. Because dude, an entire page of no views on shit is so demoralizing. Fuck, dude. Some of them have unique descriptions. I make unique thumbnails every time. And I'm not gonna claim that I'm being shadow banned or whatever because of what I'm talking about. it's because the quality is so fucking bad.